Welcome everyone to another episode of Spotlights on TSMO. My name is Patrick Sun, and I am the Managing Director of the National Operations Center of Excellence. For those of you that may be new to us, we and this show focus specifically on transportation system management and operations, or as we like to call it, TSMO. The easiest way to think about TSMO is that there are transportation practitioners, like the ones that you're going to hear, working to maximize the efficiency and the safety of our transportation system for all of our communities. Over the next several episodes that you'll see, we are interviewing all of our category winners from our NOCoE TSMO awards that we have every year. And these are some of the collection of the best ideas that we have in the industry. And so today I would like to introduce our guest, Matthew Carlisle, or Matt. Matthew is the North Carolina DOT State Signal Systems Engineer and oversees the Signal System Timing and Operations Group. He is responsible for the efficient coordination and operation of North Carolina's nearly 400 signal systems. He is currently involved in many new and upcoming technologies in the ITS and signal operations field, a lot with high resolution data and advanced traffic signal systems, and looking at it from integrating everything from automated and connected vehicles. And so with that, Matt, welcome to our show, and glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
If you can, for the people that are listening in, we did a case study on your submission that won, was a category winner. Why don't you go ahead and explain to us what you guys had submitted and what really is within the case study?
Absolutely, yeah. So the submittal was on our statewide signal system, and you kind of hit on it there where you said, we have about 400 signal systems. Well, my goal is to try to get that down to a lot less. Same number of signals, but all one big connected system as opposed to several hundred little closed loop systems. So in order to do that, several years ago, starting in probably 2016 or 2017, we were really gearing up to figure out how we were going to accomplish high resolution controller data and automated traffic signal performance measures. And one of the sort of prerequisites for that is having a connected signal system. And so we started looking at the different funding sources, the ways that we could leverage the infrastructure in order to achieve that. It's not as simple as just connecting some wires. There's a lot of hardware that you have to replace and a lot of software that you have to install, and there's a lot to make it all work. And I don't know how much detail you want me to go into talking about the entirety of it, or if you just want to do some questions with it. But essentially, we were able to accomplish a great deal since then. In the last few years, we've gone from having essentially zero of our closed loop systems across the state on a centrally managed platform to now we have about 600 signals that are live. It was about 500 at the time of the submission, but we're up to a little bit over 600 now. So we've made great progress, and that's 600 out of our about 2,800 total. So pretty sizable chunk in just a few years.
And that's really great to see. And for the people that are listening in, the amount of things that go on in the background is so critical. I think if you can expand a little bit more on what you guys had submitted and the progress that you have made, but really how many different people were in play? Like how many different groups, who were you talking to really get it into a centralized system?
Yeah, so it's a lot of people, especially with any government agency, and especially a big statewide agency like this. The bigger that you are, the more people you're going to have to work with and sort of convince of things. So, in terms of the people that we had to work with, I would say primarily it is with the day-to-day operators of the systems. So we have 14 highway divisions across the state. Each one has a division traffic engineer, and they have their own traffic signal technicians and staff. And anytime you're talking about trying to make sort of a wholesale change to the system, you really want to get them on board. You can, at the statewide level, sometimes you can kind of, ramrod things, but that's not the best way to go about it. So we really tried to work with them early on to explain, hey, here are the benefits, the tangible benefits that you're going to get out of going this route. And yeah, you might have to learn how to use some new hardware and software, but the end result is really going to be a benefit to you and your day-to-day operations. And then after that, it was a lot of project managers, primarily, I guess, and some of the higher level executive leadership in terms of getting funding to do it. So we went about getting the funding in a couple different ways. It wasn't just one big project that got this done. We leveraged some large interstate widening projects where we use some of our detour and alternate routes that have the signals on them. We were able to use those as a funding source, as well as some of our spot mobility funding.
And you mentioned something really great, especially just the creative ways that you brought this project to life. But it was really a wholesale change that you guys had embarked on and are still on. So, from a leadership perspective, how have you been able to manage the fatigue that happens with any long project, right? Like, people are just like, oh, is this project ever going to end? And you're like, sometimes yes, sometimes no. But how did you keep people motivated?
Well, for one thing, I wouldn't say it's a project as much as it is sort of an initiative and a goal. So I don't see us, finishing this project exactly in the super near future, because it's a bit of a not a sprint, but more of a marathon, I guess. I wish we could just have a huge sum of money and upgrade thousands of signals in the course of a few months, but that's not quite what we were able to do. But in terms of keeping people engaged, it was really important, like I talked about earlier, to kind of the boots on the ground, to make sure that we communicate with them really well. So once we had made the decision to go this route, and we felt like we had some funding opportunities to do so, I went around to all the division offices around the state as part of a just typical sort of retiming program system level visit. And that's where I first sort of broached the subject of, hey, look, here's what we're looking to do. Here are the benefits. Here's how it's going to work. Here's the kind of equipment you need, the kind of software that we're going to be working with. And I started that at least a year before we ever actually were able to do anything. And that was to sort of ease them into it. And so it didn't catch anybody off guard when this division all of a sudden has a few hundred signals. Their neighboring divisions aren't like, what is this? Why don't I have it? That kind of a thing. And in terms of keeping people engaged, it hasn't really been difficult, because we have, I would say, maybe half of our divisions that have the bulk of the upgrades. We've done them in sort of geographical clumps, if you will. Nothing but positive reviews and feedback with all the other divisions, and everybody knows how helpful and useful it is. So if anything, people are more eager now to get it than they were, before we had it. Now they've actually seen the fruits of the labor. That's
great to hear, especially where the organization is coming together at a cultural level, to really accept this change, embrace it, and use it, to the best of their abilities, and even, perhaps purposes that you guys always wanted to do, which is now enabled. And so as we're looking at this, from a central system software, and softwares can only do so much, and technology is sometimes assumed to be all that everything TSMO is. But a lot of times technology is the enabler. So could you talk a little bit more about how the central system really enables you to do perhaps things that you didn't get to do before, just because of the way it was set up, and what this new initiative and the technology that comes with it has really allowed you all to kind of embrace and enable.
No, that's a really good point, Patrick, because if we just snapped our fingers and had all of our signals on this system, that in and of itself is not a tremendous benefit. It doesn't really change the day-to-day operations unless we change the way that we use that tool. So this is just a tool, and it's a big leap forward from what we had before. Before, we had these little closed-loop signal systems, like I talked about, hundreds all around the state, with serial-based communications and maybe a dial-up modem that may or may not work. And now we're converting those to, Ethernet, faster, more stable communications, and they're communicating 24/7 back to a statewide centralized server. So, but again, just connecting it doesn't do a whole lot. So the things that we've been able to do on one of the most basic levels is just across the board, perfect clock synchronization. I mean, that's a really simple and easy thing once you have it, but before you have it, it's not that way. Clocks drift and you lose communications, and if you're not talking 24/7 to your signals, you might not know until you need to have that communication. So I don't want to get into all the little bits and pieces of the basic benefits of it, but some of the things that we've been able to do now that we do have it, primarily I would say, is incident management, and that was actually not something we didn't think about. That was actually a big driving force behind it, and the way that we were able to actually accomplish some of these upgrades is as an additional tool in our belt for incident management, along with some of our big interstate widening projects. And the other thing, not just managing incidents, but also planned detours for construction. And that's not something that we really thought about in advance or planned for, but once we had it out there, and we have a project going on. In fact, we've just had a few in the last couple of months because of COVID, having reduced traffic volumes, some of our construction engineers, some of our resident construction engineers are willing to kind of loosen the knobs a little bit on allowing lane closures at certain times of the day or certain durations, just because there's less traffic. And as a result of that, we've actually had some pretty sizable closures or partial closures on interstates. And because we've had these signals that are on the statewide signal system on our parallel routes, we've been able to divert traffic and use pre-designed signal timing plans to accommodate that traffic. And that's not something that we would have thought of, but we've actually saved the state a tremendous amount of money in contract time and contract obligations by allowing those types of activities.
And that's so great to hear, because it's really a kind of this exponential factor that happens once you start to be enabling the technology to work for the day-to-day operations and to work for some of your larger initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, you have a very interesting job, let's say, right? And in your particular position. And so I'm going to kind of throw a little bit of a curveball at you. As you've gone and managed your team from something that was, more in person to kind of what we're dealing with the COVID pandemic and virtually, what are some perhaps challenges that you've overcome or things that you've been able to embrace a lot more in working with your team virtually?
It's funny, actually. I think that I talk to my staff more now that we aren't working in the same building. This may not be the case for everyone, but in my particular case, we weren't, right next to each other in our building. And so I'd probably go down there and see them maybe once a day, a few times a week. And they're out in the field a lot, obviously, because they're all signal timing engineers, and you can't do all of that sitting at a desk. But I think now that we're actually, even though we had the technology before, we weren't using it. But now that we really can just anytime we want, we can have a video chat, or we can do a Microsoft Teams meeting and screen share. If anything, I think that our communication level has kind of increased. Specifically with the project that we're talking about, if we had to be working from home 40 hours a week, which is pretty much what we're all doing now, years ago, before we had this system in place at all, then it would have been much more challenging because, like I said, at best, we would have dial-up modem communications, and most people don't have a phone line anymore. So we have a big building of a few hundred people, and we specifically had to get a couple of phone jacks put in just in my staff's cubicles so that we can, kind of connect to those legacy systems. So because we have this, they can sit on their laptops right at their house, connect to our statewide system as if they were sitting at the office. So it's been a tremendous benefit to have it during these kind of work from home.
And that's a really great point about, the teamwork that goes into just managing these systems behind the scenes, where even the general public might not even be aware of it. I'll give you one last kind of a question, and as we wrap up towards the end, but who do you want to think? And this project includes a lot of people, but kind of who would you want to recognize as you've seen this for the last couple of years, and even as you continue, that contribute to the success of this? From your leadership and from the teamwork that goes on at North Carolina?
Well, I'd have to say my current boss, who was previously had my position, she really got this started and sort of handed it off to me when I came into this about 2.5 years ago. So that's Jennifer Portanova. And she's really good at looking forward and thinking about what kind of things we need and sort of planting the seeds for it. And so I was able to come along and kind of water that seed. So I'm glad that it was here for me to pick up the ball and run with it. But also our division staff, especially like our field technicians and Division 10 staff specifically, Division 10 traffic engineer out there, Tony Tagliaferri, we work together so well. He's very technically minded. He actually used to work for Carlisle, which is the company whose system we're using. So he helped a tremendous amount in getting it set up and figuring out how to program all the different bits and pieces of it, and helped me coming up with standards and templates to roll out. Essentially, he was that division link that said, look, here's what we need to do to make it easy for the other 13 divisions to do this. Like, I know how to do this, but they don't know how to do this. And so he really helped me put together essentially it's a zip file, because there's videos and all kinds of stuff in it. But we have put together a nice little toolbox that we would distribute to our division traffic staff when they would have one of these upgrades come online for converting it over to the statewide system. And it just step-by-step walked them through every single thing that they needed to know. So, there's lots of other people that have been instrumental in this. Of course, our IT staff that actually, stood up the server and helped me with getting it updated whenever we have new versions come out, and installing the latest version on hundreds of machines across the state. It's been a lot to manage, but it's gone really smoothly. I've been really happy with it and impressed with everybody that I work with. I have great people to work with.
Yeah, and that is such a great note, of all the people that contribute to the success of this project, which we know from NOCoE is not something that's just driven by one person.
Right.
And, many people, the technicians, the operators, the people who really step up, and just think about their colleagues and make sure everyone can embrace it. And that's another reason why we really do these spotlights on TSMO, to get you a little bit deeper into understanding how TSMO can be implemented and how it can benefit you, your agency, and the community that you serve. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt. See you later.
Thanks, Patrick.